Rabotai, Be'ezras Hashem, Mincha is going to be 6:55 and Sirihot at 6:15. So please be on time. The learning is sponsored for the success of somebody anonymous and Refuah Shlema Devorah Bat Berta. Any further sponsorships, please contact Rabbi Babayev. As we were discussing the halachot of Eruvin, and we mentioned that the Eruv requires two parts, or really one and two A and 2B. But the first part is an enclosure. It needs to be enclosed either through walls or tzurat petach or strings. And the second part is there needs to be the bread of the Eruv. But the bread of the Eruv is not good enough because the bread that unifies all the Jews is not applicable for the non-Jews. There was never instituted for non-Jews to include them into the Eruv through bread. And therefore you have to sort of rent the places of all the non-Jews so that they're also viewed as if they belong to the Jews. However, the Gemara states very clearly that this rental is not official, is not legal necessarily, it's ceremonial. It's more of a recognition for the concept of Ilchot Eruvin as opposed to having teeth and really taking a serious effect. Which is interesting because in contrast to Mechirat Chametz, it has to be legitimate. It has to be a real sale. But when it comes to Eruvin, since the whole thing is a rabbinic institution, they didn't require high standards. It required simply a heker, a recognition that you're sort of allowed access to their jurisdiction. So it has to be done through rental. However, it's not such a problem. Today they use either the police department or the governorship or the president of the borough or such things. Sometimes they use the utility company because they have access to all the homes. Various things like that in order to allow for the Eruv to happen. And that's certainly the case. Let's say a place that does not have Eruv. We're not going to talk about the big cities that have Eruvin. He's in a little area that doesn't really have Eruv, but it has a big apartment complex. And he lives in that apartment complex. Or if he lives in the big city, but they announce that the Eruv is down. A lot of times what people don't pay attention to is it's almost understood, okay, in the apartment I'm able to carry because it's enclosed. There's obviously the apartment building has maybe 20, 30 apartments in it, but it's all enclosed. So within the building, I should be allowed to carry even if there is no Eruv. And that is simply false. That's just not true. Although Rav Ben Zion tried to make that argument because of various calculations, all the poskim rejected, including Rav Ovadia, including the Rabbi Moshe Halevi, Hazon Ish, even the Mishnah Be'ura seems to imply this way very clearly. Many of this poskim, certainly the modern poskim, they all hold a person who lives in an apartment complex actually needs an Eruv. What do we mean by he needs an Eruv? He needs to have bread that unifies the whole entire apartment complex. Why? Because maybe there's a few Jews living there and a few Goyim living there, and they prohibit on each other from taking from their homes into the hallways and certainly into other people's homes. So although you're able to carry within your house, that's fine because you don't need a Eruv for within your house. But when you go into the hallway, which is considered to be a quasi-public domain, or into somebody else's house, that would require a Eruv on a rabbinic level. Do such a Eruv is a little bit tricky because you would have to rent all of the places of all the Goyim and include all the Jews in the matzah or in the challah that you would have. So you probably have to speak to Rav to do it in a proper way, but you could probably go to the superintendent or the manager of the building or the person who owns the building and say, listen, we need this for carrying. I need you to give me permission. I'll give you $5. I'll give you a small fee. And you permit us to use the rooms for the sake of carrying, to rent out the rooms for the permissibility of carrying on Shabbat. Now he'll be like, what does that mean? You explain to him, it's a process that we have to go through in order to allow us to carry in the hallways. That's the reason why we do it. It's a recognition that the Gemara considers. And therefore he'll say, okay, Beseda, no problem. And you give him the $5. You make the recognition. And that way you essentially have all the rentals of the building. Now you could take bread and you could be mizakeh, give it to somebody else in order for all the Jews to acquire. And you made a Eruv. But without making a Eruv, no one's going to be allowed to carry from their rooms to the hallway if they live in a city that does not have Eruv. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize is very much Ilchot Eruvin, and it's certainly textbook prohibition of carrying from one domain to another domain, even in the same building, which is not allowed. Which actually is going to lead us to tomorrow. What happens if a person's in a hotel? What happens if a person's in a hospital? And all these cases, a person who's in a yeshiva, would they be allowed to carry within the building if there's no Eruv in the city? Bezrat Hashem, we'll see tomorrow and probably the next few days. Baruch Adonai le'olam.
Amen, amen.